Välkomna allihopa och till en liten kort intervju och signering med Elizabeth Bear och Ian McDonald. De är, som kanske några av er vet, hedersgäster på den pågående Eurocon borta på KTH. Och vi har glädjen av att kunna få hit dem till bokhandeln också. How about we start with Nene and...
I already asked you to start.
Okay. By all means. Johan Frick will talk a bit with Ian McDonald, and then Nene will talk with Elizabeth Bear, and after that you can have your book signed.
Cool.
Hello, Ian.
Good morning.
How are you today?
None of them are on.
Ah,
They are, yeah.
Yeah, they are.
there you go. So, can you hear us?
Dead silent.
A bit of enthusiasm. I'm going to hear it. Yes!
Exactly. So, let's start at the beginning, shall we? What brought you to science fiction in the first place?
My mother.
How is that?
My mother made me into a science fiction writer. It's very Freudian. When I was a wee kid, I was always an imaginative child. My mother, I must have been under 5 years old, because it was before I came to Ireland. She picked me up, she sat me down on the sofa in front of the television and said, "Watch this, you'll like this." And what it was an early Jerry Anderson puppet show. The guys who did Captain Scarlet, Thunderbird and Joe Renti, all those great shows. It was the very first one they were called Supercar. And she sat me down to watch Mike Mercury in Supercar, and that was a slippery slope. I blame my mother for it. You probably get it on DVD somewhere actually. Mike Mercury in Supercar probably looks like rubbish now.
So, when you started writing yourself, did you always want to be a science fiction writer? Was that always what you wanted to write?
I'm not sure it was what I wanted to write, but by the time I kind of got to writing stuff, I've been reading so much science fiction that my brain was inevitably shaped in that direction. You know, that was kind of that science fiction had coloured the way I looked at the world and thought about things. So it was kind of inevitable that I would kind of ask the kind of questions that science fiction writers ask about the world, and kind of write that kind of story. So yeah, and the awful thing is that once you start writing science fiction, even though you can move to other genres, that kind of mindset is still in your head. It's a way of looking at the world.
Yeah. Still, it's fairly obvious, especially in your early books, I think, that you must have read lots of other things as well. I mean, Desolation Road is obviously very influenced by magic realism.
Yep.
And things like that, so you brought other sorts of way of looking at the world into the mix.
Yeah, I was kind of playing games with the genre basically, which is kind of an arrogant thing to do on your first book. But
it's good to be arrogant.
Well, yes, exactly what you're talking about. When you're young, you can do these kind of things. But it was just. I mean, the Victorians did an awful lot of damage to the idea of creativity, in that they had this idea that every artist had to be a creative genius, locked in their own private world with their own immense thoughts coming out of them and filling eternity. And the whole idea on kind of the genius and the originator of stuff, that was what creativity was about. But I take a more 18th century view of this kind of thing, because I'm very fond of the 18th century, when composers would borrow, swap and trade musical themes all the time between them, and people had no problem writing mashups of other people's works. I mean, we kind of think that mashups are a modern kind of hip thing. No, they're doing this way back in the 18th century. And creativity was seen as a much more communal, shared thing then. You know, you built on the sources before you borrowed from people around you. It was all big, you know, you were part of a community. And I think we're kind of getting back to that kind of mindset again. Or then again, that's just my excuse for shamelessly stealing things.
So, a little bit later on, you started to write science fiction that was, especially in your last 4 or 5 books.
Yeah, not that one.
Not that one, but the rest of them. That are set in developing countries.
Yeah.
What made you choose those settings? Well, that's a big question. That's 3 different settings, but
Yeah.
still. But do they have anything in common?
I think it's because science fiction is always seen as, instinctively, we kind of think of science fiction as being a Western genre. I mean, people say about Star Trek, oh, how great it was, first interracial kiss, you know, multinational crew and all that in the original series of Star Trek. But I was kind of watching the old series and I thought, when did you ever see anyone from India on Star Trek? Never. Because all that Star Trek reflects was the particular US ethnic makeup, you know, pushed into space, really. And I kind of got to thinking that there are big cultures that don't really feature in the Western view of the future. Japan, because Japan is cool and it's full of manga things and spiky hair and, you know, nice funky things to eat. And China, because you know, it's that kind of apologies, but kind of North American. You know, when North Americans think of Asia, they think of China. It's kind of the North American default Orientalism. But from my side of the Atlantic, when we think of Asia, we think of India, and I hadn't seen a big fat book about India that kind of looked at India in the future and thought, well, here's a big developing nation, what would it be like? So it was 1999, I finished the book over lunch with my editor and my agent, and then 5 years later, River of Gods rolled out, and it got me thinking, I mean, what other countries are there that are big developing nations, you know, that will be big players in the coming century that haven't really been looked at. So hence my tour of India, Brazil and Turkey.
I suppose that you must have done quite a lot of research into that. You must have traveled extensively to these countries.
Yeah, I have one kind of useful writing tool, which is I have a very, very good visual memory. And if I go somewhere and I see something, I mean, I'll take photographs, but most of what I use is my visual memory, because I can recreate something pretty exactly years later from just purely from visual memory. But yeah, I mean, it's River of Gods was 5 years to write. Brazil was about 2.5 years, and the Dervish House, which is set in Istanbul, was 3 years to write. So there's a lot of work goes into it. Lots of research, lots of weird stuff. And there's lots of weird stuff in that one. So.
Oh yeah, in a good way, of course.
In a good, yes.
Natural. So do you think that your own background as an Englishman in North Ireland helped you to sort of understand these post-colonial places?
Ooh, yeah. Have you been reading my Wikipedia? Have you been writing my Wikipedia? Yeah. Yes, it's one of these pleasingly complex things that, as it says in the Wikipedia, my dad was from Scotland, my mother was from Ireland. I was born in Manchester and then lived most of my life in Northern Ireland. And I was there from the start of what we call the Troubles, and we do call it the Troubles. I was there at the start and I was there at the finish, and it struck me as, well, you know, no one should have to live through that, let alone 1.5 million people in Northern Ireland and their relatives, but it did strike me as a kind of quite a good prep education for life in the 21st century.
So, I understand that right now you've been working on a series of children's books?
Younger readers, yeah, well.
Younger readers.
Yes, younger readers. I've got a couple of projects on the go. I'm in the middle of selling. It's a long, slow process because everyone's going, this is interesting. I'm in the process of selling a new kind of adult book. New adults. No, a new book for older readers. It's quite different from what I call the New World Order series. It's kind of starts about 20 minutes from now and finishes 15 years from now, so it's very, very near future. And there's lots of kind of interesting, cool stuff in it. But it's quite different from anything I've done before, so my agent wants to push me slightly out of science fiction. He wants me to move to the same area that kind of Neil Stephenson's occupying, where you're getting the mainstream readers as well as science fiction readers. But in the meantime, while that one's selling, I'm doing a young person series for Pyre. First volume comes out in December. December this year, with a great cover from the mighty John Cassio, artist extraordinaire. And there will be a French edition coming out as well sometime soon. So I've sold 3 books in the series. They are fun. They're designed to appeal to the kind of 14-year-olds who go down and switch on Doctor Who.
So you're sort of going back to your roots here.
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much.
Are they science fiction?
Yeah, well, yeah. Oh, by God, they are. Yeah, right, straight down the line, these ones. Parallel universes and all that, oh yeah.
All the good stuff.
All the good stuff.
Okay, how about we
Hand over to me,
hand
huh?
over to
Thank
Or
you
to
very
you,
much.
I mean.
You're driving.
I'm driving home. Let's not hope so.